Hey, it's me, Maggie J. Today with a review and recap of a little show that I really enjoyed. It's called The Outlaws. It's a quick 6-hour-long series that is available through Amazon Prime. The first thing that caught my eye about this one is this guy right here, Christopher Walken. Who doesn't want to watch this guy, right? After reading the blurb, I thought it was going to be similar to The Misfits, another UK show I absolutely loved about a group of people doing community service. But there's no superpower-inducing lightning going on here. They're still doing community service, though. Community payback, actually. I wrote 3 different drafts trying to talk about this show without spoilers, but all of those versions sucked because I wasn't able to tell you what the story is about. So forgive the spoilers here. I don't think it ruins the show. This information comes mostly from the first episode, but this is the bare minimum I could tell you to hook you into watching. So, this show takes place in Bristol, UK, and the premise here is that all these people are petty criminals, and they've been given at least 100 hours of community payback. And this program requires them to assemble however many days a week and clean up this vandalized community center for several hours until they've all finished their sentence. Over time, they get to know each other. Some of them like each other a lot. Some of them disagree a lot. But they show up mostly on time and do enough work to keep their minder happy. The overarching plot is that this young man, Christian, is working his tail off every which way he can to provide for himself and his younger sister, Esme. But Esme hates all his efforts and just wants to hang out with the gangsters that hang out in front of their apartment building because they're always having fun and driving Range Rovers and giving away money. It's nearly time for Esme to take her final exams and carry on to college or wherever. Christian just wants to make sure his sister has the best chance she can to go on to something better than where they came from. Due to the Brook Hill gang putting pressure on her to do criminal things for them, Christian agrees to do a home invasion robbery job so she wouldn't have to. But instead of stealing a phone like he was told, Christian also tries to steal a duffel bag full of money because he can't not, given his situation. He almost doesn't pull it off, but a girl from the community payback group who overheard the threats from the gangsters and knows the address of the house being robbed created a distraction outside and gave Christian a chance to escape the house with the phone and duffel bag. CCTV, which is apparently everywhere in the UK, caught this entire illegal entry/exit on tape, and because a gun can clearly be seen, a special detective unit has been assigned to figure out what happened here. Christian then hides the bag of money up at the community center that they're cleaning up because where else could he possibly put it in this entire city of Bristol but right exactly in the worst spot to smuggle it back out of? As you would expect, someone else stumbles upon the duffel bag, and given they are clueless as to where it came from or how it got there, they have to decide whether to keep it or turn it into the authorities, because they are in need of money in a big way, and all kinds of craziness stems from there. Not everything revolves around the gangsters and the stolen money, though. A lot of what happens during these 6 episodes is personal growth. Every character here is on their own journey, often feeling alone in their day-to-day grind, so finding camaraderie and support amongst a group of strangers is very cathartic. This story isn't about how to outsmart a gang or whether it's moral or not to keep large amounts of money you find. I think it's more about the lengths that people are willing to go to when given the chance to help someone else. There are also some scenes that don't make 100% sense to me during my many rewatchings because of the twist that happens near the end. Oh, did I forget to tell you there was a big twist? Oops. There's a big twist at the end that makes some of the scenes in the beginning make less sense. But it was not a twist I was expecting. I thought the story was going along pretty well before they threw this surprise in there. And even more surprisingly, I don't think it completely ruined the story. Yes, I have a few more questions about certain scenes, but this show is also rife with conveniences, which makes it ultimately an impossible story to occur because luck is never on anyone's side this much less a group of people, but it is a fun watch. Some of these jokes will get you right in the gut, and if you're a Brit, I think these jokes will hit even harder because there's several times I was like, what the fuck does this mean? Overall, I rate this 4 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend. Great writing, amazing casting, wonderful chemistry, dynamic character growth, touching development. It's funny, it's dramatic. It made me cry a few times, which okay, we both know that that's not hard, but I hope that you get a chance to watch it because it is really worth the investment in time. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go through each episode scene by scene because I have a job now and I no longer have that kind of time. So I'm going to quickly discuss the characters of this show and some of the plot lines I thought made it worth the watch in hopes that you will take the time to consume. If you have watched, please tell me how you felt about this show, these characters, what happened, and what you loved or hated, because I definitely want to talk a whole lot more about this title, but I just can't afford to make a 2-hour video about it. This will be where I get more into the spoilers and what certain characters do throughout the runtime, so if that's not what you came here for, thank you for watching. Please consider liking and or subscribing, and make sure you stay safe out there. If you are here for the whole scoop, first, we got to talk about this group of criminals. Ronnie actually gives us a perfect summation of their character types in episode 2, which I thought was funny and priceless. To build upon those stereotypical surface traits and maybe prove that she's spot on in her summations, I'll tell you some more about these people. Frank is an American who came to Europe to avoid the Vietnam draft and then never left. He's just finished a stint in prison for writing fraudulent checks, but is now on overnight house arrest and has to stay with his adult daughter and her 2 kids, and she is not happy about this. She tells her kids every day that Grandpa is a lying, thieving, selfish bastard who can't be trusted, so they know who they're dealing with. He seems nice enough, though. He makes jokes, he has good insight and advice, gives off cool grandpa vibes, but he has a tendency of abandoning his family and being gone for years at a time without so much as a goodbye, so her anger is understandable. Greg is a super tall lawyer who is terrible at his job, painfully socially awkward, and wants so badly to be part of a group. Any group. Late one night, this guy paid a woman to spend some sexual recreational time with him, but before he could get to the end, they got busted by the police, and now one of his co-workers, whom I call the deskmate dickhead, because I refuse to give a shit what his actual name is. I'm not sure what else I can say about Greg. He doesn't have much of a personality. He'll be anything that you like, and he's loyal as hell, which is kind of important to a group like this. Myrna is an old-school radical activist who's got a lot of angry opinions and ideas of the changes that should be taking place and isn't afraid to break the rules to prove her point. She comes off as gruff and like she doesn't want to be anyone's friend, but she's got a big heart under all that anger. If anyone found that out, though, it might kill her. She's on papers due to her hijacking a police recruitment trailer and dragging it around the city for 40 minutes while using a loudspeaker to broadcast anti-police rhetoric. Pretty boss move there, but also very illegal. John is the second-generation owner of a brake pad company. He's got a lot of daddy issues because his father is an unbearable prick, and he is about the exact political opposite of Myrna the activist, while being so similar in personality. They're both grumpy jerks who would like it if you just let them be. Later in the series, we learn he is here because one night, 2 people broke into his house, so he chased them out and beat one of them up, so he's been sentenced to community payback for his crimes against society. As an American, I've got a lot of thoughts and feelings about this situation, but I'm gonna hold on to them for later. Lady Gabriella Penrose Howe, better known as Gabby, is an actual titled lady who's pretty much as you would expect a lady with a rich daddy and 1.2 million Instagram followers to be. Shallow, self-centered, focused on trivialities. She's a bit of a wreck and one night took a screwdriver to her girlfriend's car while on a bender, which is her second offense of public vandalism, but she seems to truly want to change the kind of person she is through this experience. Also, she's planning a music festival that she thinks will change the world, if her daddy will let her. Ronnie is the youngest of the group, a sheltered Indian girl who spends all her time studying and has earned a full ride to Oxford. She's got it all going the right way, according to some people, aka her parents, but she's become a bit of a klepto due to the stress and pressure of being perfect. Her scholarship is in jeopardy due to the extent of her shoplifting, but if she completes this program with a letter of recommendation, Oxford will let her attend next semester. And that is definitely used against her by the authorities here. Very unfair for Ronnie. I already told you about Christian, the guy trying to keep himself and his sister out of the clutches of the local gang, who winds up doing exactly what they want him to do and hopes that they'll leave his sister alone so she doesn't ruin her whole future. Diane is the community service officer in charge of this little group. She used to be in a lot of trouble as a kid, wound up doing community payback herself, and through some calculated ass kissing and snitching, she now works for them, supervising groups like this. She is such a stickler and so self-important, it really makes her bad at her job because she knows it all and is therefore never wrong, and cannot accept that someone might know more than her. A perfect example of shitty middle management, but she does have a knack for rhyming her demands. That's the most of the cast, so now I'm going to try to give a condensed version of what happens in each episode. Episode 1. A lot of what happens in this episode I've already covered. Through the character explanations and the description of the main plot, most of that is revealed throughout this episode, but I'll go ahead and discuss the highlights. Ronnie is busted stealing from the mall, and once caught, her mother learns this is more than a one-time occurrence. She's been doing this for months. Given her clean record and stellar school grades, she's given a deal for community service, but she will need a letter of recommendation so Oxford will allow her to keep her scholarship. Diane tries to exploit this aspect of Ronnie's punishment, telling her if she doesn't snitch on the others in her group, Diane won't write the letter, and Ronnie's parents have already told her if she lies, cheats, or steals, or does anything that requires police involvement or prevents her from going to Oxford, she will be cut off and disowned. So she's stuck between a rock and a hard place throughout this entire runtime. Frank has been in prison for several years due to some check forgery and is now on a form of house arrest where he is required to do a number of community payback hours and also must be home during the hours of 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. His daughter's house is the only place he's been approved to serve this house arrest, but he's not seen her for the last 8 years, so she is beyond angry about him being forced back into her life. She drills it into her 2 kids that their grandfather is a lying, thieving, selfish bastard who cannot be trusted. Lady Gabby shows up very late to the community center after everyone else had to go through a security checkpoint, ride a bus to this location, and sit through Diane's kind of funny feces speech. And Gabby is surrounded by the paparazzi. She tries to put on this facade like she's taking this seriously, trying to better herself through service and whatnot. But later on, she lights up a joint behind the building, which sparks a fight between Christian and John that leaves them wrestling on the ground until it's broken up by Diane and her supervisor. This entire fight is caught on camera by Lady Gabby and shared to her 1.2 million Instagram followers with a cute phrase. John, the businessman, has been on the phone nearly the entire time he's been on screen. He's got a big investment meeting coming up, so he needs his company to look as good as it can on paper, and keeps getting scolded by Diane about using his phone. After service is over, he gives a tour of his factory and seems to make a great impression upon the investors from China, despite constant sniping from his father, and the investors agree to return the following day to sign the deal. Several times, these 3 members of the Brook Hill gang drive by in their fancy Range Rover. We don't actually find out their gang name until like episode 4 or 5, but I'm going to go ahead and make it easy on both of us and use their name now. The second time they drive by, they have Christian's sister Esme in the car with them and stop to let Christian know she's volunteered to do some work for them. Work that requires her to carry a gun. Christian begs them to let him do the job. He won't even take any money, just don't let his sister hang out with them anymore. And they agree. They pass him a gun through the fence, which kicks off a whole chain of events that kept me biting my nails for the rest of the episode. Ronnie witnessed this entire exchange between Christian and the Brook Hill gang, including hearing the address of the house they want him to hit. Seeing Christian take the gun from them, and shortly after watching him put that gun into his backpack. Then it is time to go, and Diane is now demanding someone tell her about the gun. A heat gun that they brought to the site with them is now unaccounted for. Diane searches everyone's bags, but when it comes time to search Christian's, it's magically empty. Because Ronnie has put the gun into her own waistband so his bag would pass the search, which is great for now, but creates another problem back at the detention center because they have to pass through the metal detector to leave. That's weird. Thanks to quick thinking, general incompetence, and a stolen stapler, Ronnie is able to sneak through the metal detector while Greg has to go through a more thorough search from Diane. Outside, Ronnie passes the gun back to Christian and agrees to help his sister with her studies as he asked. John meets with his investors again, but they have been made aware of the video that Lady Gabby posted of him fighting with Christian, which is like 3 levels deep of we can't be seen with you in public, so they refuse to invest. And John's company is suddenly weeks away from bankruptcy. But he can't bring himself to tell anyone, so he lies to his father and his wife about what happened. Even later on that day, Frank returns home to surprise his daughter with a heat gun that they use to strip the paint off this door that she's been working on since before he arrived there. He tells her he only borrowed it because she, of course, thinks that he stole it. So I hope you take it back, Frank. Otherwise, you're still lying to your daughter. Then the crime of the season happens. Christian takes his gun to the address he was given, waits for some people to leave the house, then gains entry and attempts to steal the phone, as he was instructed. The guys inside tell him the phone is under the rug, but there's also a duffel bag full of money in there. So he takes them both because why not? The guys he saw go outside are just about to come back inside the house, but a van drives by, shines their bright lights on the house, and honks their horn, distracting everyone and giving Christian a chance to escape from the house with the phone and the money. As he runs outside towards the van, he sees that it's Ronnie behind the wheel, and he waves her on. He keeps running while those people in the house he just robbed come outside. One of them takes several photos of the van driving away, capturing the name, address, and phone number of Ronnie's father's plumbing business, which happens to be their home address. Oof. The other guys chase after Christian, who manages to get away, then hides the bag of money inside the ceiling tiles of the community center that he's been tasked to clean up through the community payback program. Excellent choice, sir. Due to all the CCTV in use, because this is the UK, and the entire home invasion and exit was caught on camera, and because a gun is obvious on the footage, a special unit has been assigned to figure out what the hell happened here. Episode 2. It is unclear how far back in time we're looking, but in the beginning of this episode, and every episode really, we take a look into the past to find out why Tall Pockets Greg and Lady Gabby were given community service. So, Greg had hired a prostitute and wound up getting busted by the police with her in a parking lot. He attempted to escape, but crashed into the police car, then flattened all of his tires by trying to exit through an entrance with, wrong way tire spikes and shit. So, very busted, big guy. Meanwhile, Lady Gabby can see that her girlfriend is listening to her Netflix and chill playlist. So she drove her drunk ass on over to the girlfriend's apartment, screamed at the building from the street, then carved the word skank into the side of her girlfriend's car. Gabby and Greg wound up in lockup together that night, so it makes sense why they seem to become friends during their stint doing community payback. Here in the current timeline, Christian goes over to the Brookhill gang leader's house to hand over the phone he stole and tell the boss that there was no trouble. It's all good. P.S. They don't ever say this guy's name. Amazon tells me his name is Malachi, but nobody actually says it, so it feels weird to call him that, but I'm gonna do it because it's all I have. At work, Greg's dickhead deskmate tells Greg he needs to attract more clients to the firm or he's gonna be on the chopping block, especially after that prostitute situation. During their community payback hours, Frank, Myrna, and John are working inside the building by themselves when a large duffel bag full of money falls out of the ceiling tiles. They discuss what they should do, turn it into authorities, or keep it and be quiet about it. Frank is adamant he wants to take his cut and be quiet. They can do whatever they want with the rest. But they agree they should be unanimous about this decision, so Frank gives them 24 hours to decide. Christian hasn't forgotten about that money, though, and kind of pumps up his sister about them leaving Bristol. Says that they could go anywhere in the world once she's finished with her exams because he's got some money coming to him. But she's upset that the gang downstairs won't let her hang out with them anymore and won't even discuss pretending to go anywhere with him. Ronnie's parents head out to some party with friends or whatever. She tells them she might head out to the library later on, and they suspect nothing. Christian drops Esme off at the library to study with Ronnie, but she must have expected him to stay with them since she was dressed up and wearing jewelry and such. So it's a bit awkward with Ronnie looking so cute and Esme not even wanting to be there. They work out a deal eventually, and it seems Esme is pretty smart on her own. Frank's grandson's party. So the underlying storyline throughout this episode is that Frank is throwing his grandson a party to impress a girl the grandson has a crush on. But after a few days, a boy at school warns the grandson that no one's coming to his shitty party, alcohol being present or not, and even the girl he really wants to come kind of shrugs, meaning she likely won't. But Grandpa Frank tells the kid he's invited a famous person to the party, so his friends better rethink not showing up. This works because, of course, it works. And thankfully, Frank actually knows a famous person and works out a deal with Lady Gabby to show up at the party for a few minutes. And oh boy, does she know her role. She singles out the grandson, tells him she's missed him, finds the girl he's interested in, takes photos with her and with everyone, with the grandson on her arm. Marketing genius she is, but it actually took her like forever to get to this party. First, she got super wasted at a club, drove herself to the ex-girlfriend's house, nearly vandalized her car again, went to a fast food drive-thru, experienced a bit of road rage with the car behind her, smashed it to bits, got arrested, had to call Greg to bail her out, finally remembered she was supposed to show up at Frank's grandson's party, stopped to pick up a dozen pizzas, had Greg pay for them, then took them to the party where everyone was so happy to see her. What a beautiful disaster. Meanwhile, again, I know, Ronnie's parents are on the way home from meeting up with their friends, and she is also on her way home from the library. Ronnie arrives home first and is alone in the house, but she's not really alone. We see some people are stalking her from outside and surprise her before her parents arrive home and demand that she look at some photos. These are the guys that Christian robbed. She tells them her family's van was stolen about a week ago. She doesn't know why they have photos of it from Sunday night, the night of the robbery. They accept her answer and leave just before her parents get home. But that's not the end of the saga. Those same guys who ran up into Ronnie's house head over to talk to the Brook Hill boys and give them a phone. On the other end is a guy they call the Dean, asking where is his phone and his duffel bag, full of 6 months of his earnings in this area. That sounds like a long time to be collecting funds, bro, but whatever. I'm not a gangster. The Dean says he is going to kill someone over this money being missing, either someone they turn over to him or the Brook Hill gang themselves. Episode 3. This episode shows us how Myrna earned 100 plus hours of community payback. She stole a police recruitment trailer and had quite the time driving around and using the megaphone to talk shit about the police department's statistics. 40 minutes they chased her, which is pretty impressive, I think. If not for the cops she was holding hostage, they probably would have been more aggressive to take her down. We also see how John wound up on the community payback team. I mentioned before, but I'll give more detail here because I think this might be the most unfair demonstration of justice amongst the whole group. John and his wife are getting ready for bed. The wife says she thinks she heard something, so John goes to look and actually finds 2 people wearing ski masks rummaging through his downstairs office in the dark. He chases them out of the house, tackles one of them, then proceeds to punch them in the face a few times. The wife rushes out and yells for him to stop. She looks horrified that this is how he responded to some intruders in their house. And for whatever reason, the local municipality has reason to charge him with assault. But I'm over here like, what is he supposed to do when he finds people with masks on going through his drawers while his family is upstairs? If this were most places in America, he could have shot them dead where they stood. So I think a few punches in the face is getting off pretty easily for someone who wore a ski mask into someone else's house trying to steal shit. But whatever, here he is, and no wonder he is so annoyed to be here. Sadly, his father and I share the same opinion on what he did, so I'm just gonna have to live with that. While at Community Payback in the current timeline, Frank, Myrna, and John are discussing their intentions with the money they found. John and Myrna are still adamant they want to turn it in, all of it, but Frank tells them to keep thinking, don't be too hasty about making this choice. Then John is served with notice that he's being sued by the person he beat up, the home invader, for racial discrimination, because out of the two people he was chasing, John chose to attack the black person, not the white accomplice. The racial discrimination suit really sets Myrna off, who is already all fired up to go to her activist meeting for a demonstration taking place that evening. She refuses to hear any of John's excuses and now has quote-unquote proof that he is a racist. They must have finished their hours early today because a lot happens afterward. Myrna goes to her activist meeting, but she has, unfortunately, been voted out of the group due to her stealing of the recruitment trailer. The new leader refuses to let her even attend the meeting, telling Myrna that her tactics are outdated and useless. If they were going to be effective, they wouldn't be fighting the same problems they were in the 80s when Myrna started this group. Touché. Defeated, Myrna agrees to leave. Lady Gabby has hired Greg to help her organize a music festival she's creating. Everyone is buzzing that Lady Gabby is in the office, and while Greg is away for a few minutes, deskmate Dickhead creeps into the conference room and persuades Gabby to take a little break and join him on a friend's boat. Unable to say no to a good time, she abruptly abandons Greg, saying she'll be back shortly, once her head is less fuzzy. Then she and Dickhead are off onto a swanky party boat. Meanwhile, Ronnie met with Esme at the library for a while, and when Christian came back to pick up his sister, she tells him to walk Ronnie to the bus stop. So they go for a walk, but they don't wind up at the bus stop at all. They do that walk and talk and flirt thing where they're so wrapped up in each other it takes them a while to realize they're being followed by the Brook Hill gang. They attempt to lose them by joining up with a protest march, Myrna's protest group to be specific, and after a few blocks they break it off and run through all these alleys and stairways. Then they're suddenly here, surrounded. Their only option is to run down this dock and jump onto this boat that's taking off right now. And wouldn't you know, it's the same party boat that Lady Gabby and deskmate Dickhead are on. What a small world. Sadly for Gabby, the coke that is on board is pub dust and unacceptable for her, so she calls Greg to pick up her prescription and meet them at the docks. He is confused but does as he's asked, loyal to a fault. Where she sent him to for her prescription is actually Christian's building, where the Brook Hill gang hangs out in front of. They give his nerdy-looking self the runaround, take his $60, but deliver no product, so he has to go to the docks empty-handed, only to find out from Dickhead Deskmate that the boat's full to bursting, bro, and they can't stop to pick him up. Christian and Ronnie give Gabby quite the guilt trip about how she's treating Greg, and she winds up tossing Dickhead's phone into the river and demanding that they all be let off the boat. She returns to the office with coffee and this probably empty bag from a cafe and sincerely apologizes for leaving Greg to do all the work by himself. Because she couldn't go to the protest, Myrna decides to take her sister up on an invitation to join her hiking group and quickly finds out this was a mistake. This group is non-political and does not want to be radicalized, so Myrna alienates all the members by calling them lazy for not taking action, belittling the things they enjoy because they are pointless, and basically being an ass. She is asked to leave the group mid-hike, which leads to an awkward scene of the hiking group walking single file on one side of the trail and Myrna on the other, all by herself. Hilarious. John, who still hasn't told anyone he lost the investors, later goes to visit Myrna to plead with her to keep the money with him. He has to save his company and fight this lawsuit, but he encourages her to use the money for her activist group, so they won't have to take the grant money from council, which Myrna thinks would be totally selling out the point of the group. Before she decides, she goes back to the activist group and tells them to vote again, now knowing that she has enough money to fund them, and they vote her back in. So now she's down to keep the cash. For an additional adrenaline surge before the end of the episode, Christian picks up Esme from the library, and when they go home, they find their apartment has been trashed, and just about everything they own is destroyed. Christian goes to Malachi's and is questioned again. This time a gun is involved, but Christian keeps his cool. Tells Malachi someone is trying to play him. He didn't steal any money, and he is let go. Ronnie arrives home from the party boat to find 2 detectives in her house questioning her parents. They show her the CCTV footage of their family van driving past a crime involving a gun, and she doesn't know what to do. Her father covers for her, saying he had an emergency call and was on his way home. He didn't know what kind of scene he came upon and kept on driving. He's got no more details, so the detective leaves. Oh, she is going to be in so much trouble. Episode 4. Today is Esme's big day. She's got her exams, finally, and Ronnie calls to wish her luck. Then Ronnie's parents abruptly take her phone away from her, which is just the beginning of her punishment. Her father tells her she is cut off and must move out, but she doesn't even know what that means. He tells her to start by getting a job. Esme carries on to school, but is unable to handle the pressure and runs away from the exam room. She heads home, but is intercepted by the Brook Hill guys, and she spends the rest of the day hanging out with them. Their plan is to see if her brother has been talking about spending money, which would prove he did steal some money from them. I really dislike watching the scenes of her hanging out with these guys because it feels icky watching them give her compliments and gifts and promise more fun stuff to happen the next time. This is grooming and it's disgusting and it's working and she doesn't even realize. At Community Payback, Frank, Myrna, and John rope Greg and unknowingly Gabby into laundering their windfall. Greg eventually agrees, but only after he's been threatened with exposing his cabinet of chaos, and spends the rest of the day making sure this washing goes off without a hitch. John's father finds out the deal with the Chinese investors fell through. John assures him he's got another investor lined up, but the dad says he wants to meet this guy, so awesome. John just needs to come up with someone to pretend to be a wealthy investor. I wonder who he could ask. How about Frank? He does lie very well, and he's more than willing to go along with his plan to help John keep his cut of the money they found. Before the meeting, Frank goes to a travel agent to buy a one-way ticket to Rio for when his ankle monitor is removed. His daughter reminded him he wasn't welcome to stay after that, back in episode 1 or 2, and in this episode she found out about the party he threw for the grandson, so her anger with him is freshly renewed. The rest of this episode is about the Christian Esme Brook Hill situation. Esme eventually gives up some useful information to the Brook Hill gang about her brother saying he's got some money coming to him so they could move away once she finishes her exams. They know they've got him now, and soon after this, Esme goes home. Christian is there and tells her that her friends, the Brook Hill gang, are the ones who trashed their apartment because of the money he stole from them. He insists they have to leave, move away forever, right now, but she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to live with him, or take exams, or go to uni. And she runs away. She goes over to Malachi's and makes a deal. If she can get the money back for him, he has to take care of her. He agrees to this without negotiating any more details, but then he goes outside to talk to his cohorts, and she follows. She overhears him telling the other two to ambush Christian. She pulls out a gun she took from inside the gang lair and winds up shooting this guy with a spiderweb tattoo and runs away again. All the way to the building where Christian is doing community payback, she runs and calls her brother to the fence. She's out of breath and crying and tells him she shot someone. He takes the gun from her and tells her to hide at their secret place. He'll find her later. She runs off again, and now we follow Christian. Don't forget he's still looking for the money, so he uses this gun to threaten John into giving it back. John tells him to give him some time. Knowing he can't take the gun onto the van, Christian hides the gun in the bathroom on top of the toilet tank, which in this bathroom is installed 4 feet above the rest of the toilet. Earlier in this episode, Diane had a meeting with the detectives who are investigating the CCTV footage, which inspires her to be more cop-like, so when she goes into the bathroom and notices there's a footprint on the toilet lid, she stands up there herself and sees the stashed gun. Of all the times to be competent, Diane! Jeez! She calls the real cops and questions the groups about a weapon she found and trips up Ronnie, who asks, why would she bring a gun here? Diane didn't say it wasn't a gun, so gotcha! Fess up, Ronnie, or no letter of recommendation. Ronnie panics. Her parents kicked her out that morning, but then agreed to give her one last chance, with even more restrictions than before, so she definitely can't risk losing her letter of recommendation, so she blurts out that it's Christian's. Everyone looks at him, and he immediately bolts out the back door. Episode 5. This is one of the least eventful episodes. Like, a lot of things happen, but only a few of them move the plot forward. And a lot of this is just to get us into position for the final episode. Here we learn Diane's backstory. She herself was sentenced to community payback a number of years ago, but snitched on some of her fellow community payback criminals and has been kissing this guy's ass ever since. In the current day, Frank has a successful meeting with John's father, posing as an American investor, and makes such a great impression they all feel confident moving forward. At Greg's law firm, one of the higher-up bosses praises him for bringing in Lady Gabby. She's attracted more big-name clients to the firm, so things are looking very good for Greg. But for now, he's got a meeting with Gabby's father about the festival. Gabby's father seems impressed by their proposal and in the end agrees that they can have this festival, but once Gabby has left the room, his lordship tells Greg this festival won't be happening. Shut this shit down. That's what he's paid to do, because ultimately his lordship signs the checks. Gabby would have nothing without his funds, so yeah. At Community Payback, Ronnie tries to get everyone to help her to find Christian, despite her parents telling her she's to have no more contact with him. She's got a whole plan that will get her the keys to Diane's office and distract Diane long enough to go through her file cabinets, but getting caught at any point could mean big trouble for any or all of them, so it's a big decision for each of them. After this, Gabby changes the subject to something related to her festival, and Greg has to let her down easy that her father won't be allowing her to have this festival. But Gabby does not go down easy at all. She verbally assaults just about everyone in the payback group and then leaves in a huff. Then, as great as things were at the beginning of this episode, everything is falling apart. Gabby is sad and angry, driving circles in her father's manor yard, leaving all kinds of muddy ruts in his beautiful lawn that he didn't want her to use for her festival because it would have gotten ruined. She winds up in jail again and has to call Greg again and opens up to him about why she's such a mess. When she was 6, she found her mother in her favorite nightgown after she'd hanged herself, and her father sent the gardener to pick up Gabby from the police station. It's only been pain and heartbreak in her life ever since. Frank's grandson finds his money and one-way plane ticket and is pissed that Frank is trying to abandon his family again. He nearly burns it all on a barbecue grill, which would have been a loss on its own, but Frank now knows he's lost the faith of his grandson, which is a loss measured on a different scale. Way to go, guy. John's father is doing his due diligence and finds out the investor he met with doesn't really exist. That Frank does community payback with John, and due to a phone call to Greg's desk, the dickhead desk mate now has reason to investigate Greg's cupboard of chaos. I forgot to mention this in the next episode recap, but the desk mate is harassing Greg all through episode 6 about coming to meet me, or I'm going to go ahead and let the partners know about all the shit I found in your cabinet. So yeah, it's going to be an issue in season 2. The following day, the group assembles and decides to help Christian, and the multi-step plan Ronnie put together goes pretty well. I won't explain it, but it is clever and involves some hilarious ad-libbing towards the end. After they get Diane's keys from her, block the camera, get into Diane's storage closet / office, and further her file cabinet, Ronnie uncovers the surprise of the season. Christian isn't actually Christian. In his file, Ronnie finds his mugshot, and it's a photo of Malachi, the leader of the Brook Hill Gang, meaning we have no clue who this guy is. Episode 6. Okay, on to the last one. Here is where we finally see the whole relationship between who we thought was Christian and the Brook Hill Gang, led by the actual Christian. So this guy works as a bouncer at a club and kicks out one of the Brook Hill guys, the one with the spiderweb tattoo, because he was selling drugs inside the club. Christian doesn't appreciate that kind of treatment towards his boys, so they rough up the bouncer and he agrees to let them sell drugs in the club, but he refuses to take any money from them for it. Later, we see the bouncer guy touring an apartment he is trying to rent for him and his sister, and the landlord or whoever tells him, just bring me the money and you can move in. He does not have the money, so he goes to the gang leader, Christian, to make a deal that he would do the community payback hours in exchange for the first month's worth of rent, and that's how he and his sister were able to move in. It does not make a ton of sense to me why the Brook Hill Gang would continue putting pressure on this guy who is already doing a job for them that seems pretty important. isn't, why they would want him to go do a gun crime that would definitely cause issues if he got caught. I'll probably talk more about this later on, but this is probably the biggest issue I have with the show. Throughout the episode, we see clips of the detectives interrogating the members of the community payback group, including Diane and the real Christian Taylor. They ask Christian how Spider wound up in the hospital and who's been doing his hours at community payback. He plays dumb, but the lady detective warns him they're coming for him. Then they have to let him go. Diane is super serious throughout the questioning, which isn't exactly helpful because she's a buffoon. When she describes who we thought was Christian to the sketch artist so he can create a composite to circulate, it looks nothing like the actual person and more like a certain celebrity she thinks looks like him. The community payback group does a bang-up job of being confused and or confusing during their interviews. It is hilarious. I love it. Once they're all released, they agree to meet at 4 p.m. to start a search for who they thought was Christian Taylor. Diane asks her boss if she can take the van and also look for this guy because it would be so helpful to the investigation, but he tells her no and then stomps all over her dream to become a police officer. So she disregards his no and takes the van anyway. I would congratulate her, but this is a really dumb move considering the kind of career she wants to get into. Ronnie is about to leave to look for Christian, who she's been told to stay away from, or else she's disowned. You know the drill. Her mother stops her to tell her a story about making good decisions and not making bad ones, no matter how nice they could make you feel. It feels like a touching moment until Ronnie doesn't follow her mother's advice, so the mother yells for the father and they send Ronnie to her room, preventing her from going to the meetup. No worries though, once the group assembles and Gabby gives out her apologies for being such a twat the day before, they figure out the problem with Ronnie and head right over there to trick her parents into paying attention to Myrna at the front door so Ronnie can sneak out the back. Nice teamwork, y'all. Well, mostly. They left Frank back at the meeting spot in case the guy they're looking for showed up, but he winds up going across the street to a bar, getting drunk, and singing karaoke with this chick for a while. The rest of the group goes over to the address on file for Christian Taylor. He answers the door. They show him a photo. He tells him that's his best friend Ben, who offered to do Christian's hours for him because he's the caregiver for his grandfather and can't leave the house for that long. Christian's not heard from Ben in a few days, though, so if they hear from him or find him, he asks if they wouldn't mind giving him a call. Seems legit, so he and Ronnie exchange info. Then they carry on to Ben and Esme's apartment building, while a nondescript guy on a bicycle follows them. Eventually, the group make their way over to a certain street that they remember Christian mentioning he lived on as a child, and they find his mother, all strung out. This scene broke my heart. Hearing the mother say she's raised a good boy while preparing to shoot up. No wonder he had to save Esme from her. Meanwhile, the detectives showed up at Ronnie's house and they and her parents discover she's not there. The detectives also learn she definitely knows Ben and that the parents have been lying to them this whole time. Ben calls Christian to tell him he's figured out his plan. Ben knows he was set up by the Brook Hill gang to steal a phone from their own boss, the Dean. Stealing the money wasn't expected, but the underlying goal was to cut the Dean out of the loop, and Christian didn't care if Ben survived or not. It was a power play that likely wouldn't have been linked back to him if it wasn't successful, because the Dean is in London and Christian is the top banana out here in Bristol. If it was successful, Christian would have just been able to become the kingpin using the Dean's phone, at least for a little while. The theft of the money fucked everything up for Christian, and the loss of the money once it was stolen fucked everything up for Ben because he couldn't give it back. And the Dean still wants his money, or some dead bodies, so Ben is not off the hook. He and Esme have to keep running. The payback group arrives at the abandoned building Ben and Esme are hiding out in just a few minutes before Ben himself gets back. He and Ronnie discuss why she is there. She wants to help, but he thinks she's just there for the thrill of doing something bad. But there's 4 other people who came with her who have nothing to gain, so his argument crumbles quickly. As a group, they discuss Ben and Esme's options. There is a gun, it was fired, someone is in the hospital, and Ben tells the group he was the one who fired the gun. Greg tells him to turn himself in and they will all support him through whatever happens next, but he doesn't want to do that. He can't trust that it will end well for him. Myrna tells him a story from another time when she felt her back was against the wall and the police told her she was just a stupid woman who should just go home. She refused and did something that resulted in the death of a police officer, that constable whose grave she visited at the back of the beginning. It was never traced back to her, but she's had to live with the guilt of it ever since, and it has changed who she is. This encourages him to turn himself in and deal with the consequences, but they know it won't be easy to get him to the cops with the gang still after them. And they're just walking around. But suddenly, here is Diane, who gets a swift punch in the face from Greg. Fast hands there, Tall Pockets. She's happy and upset that she's found Ben and been punched in the face, and that the whole group met up to find Ben, and nobody called her as she told them to. Nobody except for John, that is, the scumbag. That's how she knew how to find them at this warehouse that none of them have ever been to before. Diane yells at Ronnie, saying she is definitely not getting that letter of recommendation now. The guy on the bike who's been following the payback group all day is suddenly behind them on the phone, and Ben knows the rest of the gang won't be too far behind. They all run for the payback van, but Ronnie and Ben break off from the group because Christian has jumped out of this SUV and is chasing after them. So fast, bro. The other gangsters go after the rest of the group, and one of them grabs Myrna, but John saves her, and they dive into the back of the van as Diane floors it. They head back to the community center where they left Frank, while Ronnie and Ben run through town, crashing into bystanders, knocking over bicycles, and narrowly missing having their feet chopped off. Here is where the time versus distance equation comes to my mind, because I know the group first assembled at the community center at 4. Ronnie was late, so they had to go break her out of her house. They knocked on a ton of doors at Ben and Esme's apartments, walked all the way over to wherever Lamb's Bottom Road is, out to the building where Ben and Esme hid from their mother, and then part of the group took a van back to the community center while the other part ran on foot. Which could be understandable if you had forgotten that Frank has an ankle monitor with a curfew. He has to be home by 7 p.m., so no matter what is happening, if Frank is not home by 7, the police are coming to get him. And he is serious about his curfew, so I don't think it would be something he'd allow to creep up on him without at least attempting to get home. And we've not seen him in a while, so how big is this town, and how long does it take to walk/run from each of these locations to the other? Is this just TV magic and relying on basically impossible logistics? Or is Bristol the size of a Grand Theft Auto map and literally only takes a few minutes to run from one side to the other? Okay, rant over. I'll carry on now. Ben and Ronnie finally make it to the community center where the rest of the group have been waiting for them, but not for that long. And Frank is still across the street at the bar. Diane is more than ready to play cop again and take Ben into custody, but Esme steps up and says no, it was her that shot someone with a gun. The siblings have a power struggle over who is going to claim ownership, but here comes Frank to lighten the mood. And right behind Frank is the Brook Hill Gang. Talk about a mood killer. Boo. They make everyone get on the ground except for Ben. Christian tells his lackeys to get Ben ready to ship to London to face whatever punishment the dean has in store for the person who stole 6 months worth of earnings from them, but the rest of the group stands up between Christian and Ben. He doesn't want to beat up and or kill all of the other members of the community payback group, including a supervisor and Lady Gabriella Penrose Howe, so he and his boys leave without Ben. The police sirens probably help them to make their decision because it is now several minutes after 7 p.m. and Frank's ankle monitor has been going off. Once they arrive on the scene, Ben is taken into custody while everyone watches, but thanks to Greg's advice, they all got their stories straight before they could be questioned. The story that they all tell is that Ronnie is a jilted potential lover who made up several terrible lies about Ben because he wouldn't agree to be her boyfriend. None of the lies are crimes, and none of the crimes he's admitted to can be proven because the gun has no fingerprints on it. The person who claims they fired the gun was at Community Payback with multiple eyewitnesses before, during, and after the event, so the claims cannot be proven and the evidence cannot identify any other suspects. Quite the conundrum for the detectives. Exasperated, the lady detective who Diane has looked up to ever since she met her asks Diane how they could punish these people who they can't prove did anything. Diane smiles and suggests, 100 hours of community payback. Then we are all treated to a musical interlude. The Chain Gang song plays while all these criminals serve their time cleaning up this community center. And that's the end of the season. I really enjoyed this story, despite the issues I have found, and I recently found out that season 2 is coming in about 3 weeks. I didn't even know they got a second season, so for it to be ready for me so soon after falling in love with this, what luck! Aside from how much I enjoyed the show, I feel I need to mention the issues that I have in case they get worse in the future. My first issue is likely not going to get worse. It's pretty much come to an end. But because this happened so early in the show, I kind of wonder how we even got here to the place where we were at the end of the first episode. When the reason for the events that take place have no good reason to be taking place, it kind of nullifies the reason for the show to exist. And I'm not sure whether that is what is happening here, and I'm just overlooking it because I like it so much. Let me explain. As I said back in episode 6, the leader of the Brook Hill gang is relying on Ben to do his community service hours. So why would he ever fuck with that setup? Asking Ben to go rob a house with a gun in the UK is just asking for police trouble to ensue, no matter the outcome. Ben should have never been asked to do a robbery while also doing the community payback hours for Christian, lest he be unable to show up and that lead to the arrest of Christian Taylor himself. If these gangsters were smart, this show would not exist and I would be sadder, so I guess I have to overlook it, right? I mean, we've come this far, why stop now? Secondly, there is so much coincidence that takes place throughout, it's almost too much. But this might also tie back into my problem with not knowing how big of a place Bristol is. If it is a very small place, it might make more sense that Lady Gabby buys her cocaine from a street gangster named Spider that also happens to be part of the gang that is harassing Ben and trying to groom his sister. And that when Ronnie and Ben jumped on a boat that was pulling away from the dock, it happened to be the same boat that Gabby was on. Like, what are the chances of that? Ronnie and Ben also randomly fell in with a protest group that happens to be Myrna's protest group. Like, they just have the one here in this town. The CCTV catching Ben run across the street with a gun when there was no accident or crime reported in the area. Is someone monitoring the feed in Bristol and immediately feeding it to detectives on standby? Because the gun wasn't even fired, so how would they know? Kudos if that is what is happening, but I just don't believe that that's the way things could realistically be handled. There's probably a few more, which is kind of a lot, but is it really that big of a deal? By my metric, not big enough, but this might be a problem that carries over to the next season and get worse. Fingers crossed that that won't happen too much, and that the coincidences there, if any, are less important to the plot. I was very uncomfortable with the way the younger sister Esme behaved and the interaction she had with the gang members, especially towards the end. I felt gross watching how they treated her. I mentioned before that that's exactly grooming, and I know that that is a big problem for young girls in the UK. Not every touchy subject can be avoided or addressed every time it appears, but I wish that Esme and Ronnie could have had a conversation about her hanging out with the gangster dudes. At least maybe we could have heard Esme's perspective on why she wants to hang out with them. And this also reminds me of another thing that kind of bugged me. Ronnie and Esme are very close in age, yet are treated very differently by Ben. I'm not sure how old he is compared to Ronnie, but he is totally dad-like with Esme. They have no sibling type of bond, like they don't eat cereal together or watch certain shows together. Esme treats him like trash, which is understandable if he were someone who had been living away from her and the mom for a while, then came and took her away from the mom who let her do whatever she wanted with whoever she wanted. I don't think that they would behave this way if they had been going through the same abuse and neglect together and were of a similar age. So it becomes a bit of an age issue for me if Esme is 16 and Ronnie is 17 and Ben is like 22 or 24. But I'll come back around to that once I've seen the second season, and hopefully someone will talk to Esme about not spending her time getting used by the Brook Hill gang. Other than these things that I've listed here, I completely enjoyed this show. Can't wait for the next season. Here is where I thank you so much for watching and encourage you to like, subscribe, leave a comment, or any combination of all of those options. As a small channel, any kind of interaction is helpful, so I appreciate all of the time you've spent here. I'll be back soon enough with more ramblings about the things that I watch. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and make sure that you stay safe out there.